And Adrian's like, I'll be right there. I'm like, no, you'll be down there in the audience, all nice and safe. I'm going to be on the stage all afraid. And so he actually stood next to me on stage while I did my demo, while my demo failed.
You went into a demo in the first talk? That's a bold move.
I know. And I was hacking this like intentionally vulnerable website, and unbeknownst to me, like it would reset every night at midnight, and someone that morning had smashed it before me.
Hello friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Security Repo Podcast. Today we have a fantastic guest. We are honored to have Tanya Janca with us here, who is someone that needs very little introductions in application security and cybersecurity in general. You may also know Tanya by her handle SheHacksPurple, and is the best-selling author of the book Alice and Bob Learn Application Security, which is available on Amazon for you to purchase. Links in the description below. Tanya is also the founder of WeHackPurple, which is an online learning community that revolves around teaching everyone how to build secure software. Tanya has been coding and working in the IT space for over 25 years and has worked everywhere from public services to giant tech companies. Writing software, leading communities, founding companies, and securing all of the things. She is an award-winning public speaker, a very active blogger and podcaster, and has delivered hundreds of talks on 6 continents. And last, but certainly not least, Tanya is a champion for diversity, inclusion, and kindness, which radiates through her every time you get the opportunity to listen to her. Throughout this episode, we talk with Tanya about her journey into application security, how she started off public speak and became such a public figure now. We also talk about application security in general and what we can all do to build out better secure software. It's a fascinating topic that adds huge amounts of values, regardless of whether you're just getting into application security or are a veteran in the field. But Tanya shares with us also a huge amount of completely free resources. So if you are listening to this looking to break into application security or learn how to get into public speaking, this is going to be an incredible episode for you. So without further ado, I'll give up on my introduction to kick us off on our conversation with the fabulous Tanya Janca. How did you get into security? What was your journey into security like? Because you're such a big name in AppSec and everywhere else now. Where did it all start?
I was a software developer. So I started coding when I was a teenager. Both of my aunts and 3 of my uncles are all computer scientists. And then I'm one of the younger cousins, but eventually like all my older cousins were programmers, and then lots of my younger cousins. And so when I was like, I think I want to take computer science in college, they're like, yeah, we know. And so I was doing software development for around like maybe 15 years. And at the same time, though, I was a professional musician. So I was playing in bands and like being a folk singer all over my city of Ottawa, where I was living. And then I toured and stuff a little bit, and I released a bunch of albums. And so then one day at my office, I was introduced to this guy who was a penetration tester, and he's like, yeah, I'm in a band too. I'm like, really? Because our bands need to play together. And he kept trying to convince me from then on to join security. He's like, you'll be so good at it. Come on, let's do it. Like, you've been programming forever. That's boring now. And I was like, I don't know. Software development's pretty awesome. Like, I really liked it. But I was in the government, and I had reached the top technical level that existed, and I'd been at it for around 10 years. So I don't know if you can imagine holding the highest technical level possible and then just being like, okay, so I've been there and I've done that, because it's been such a long period of time. And it was like, you know, I technically have 18 years left till I get my pension, or I could move on to try something new. And so he convinced me to give it a go, and I apprenticed under him. And then I became a penetration tester after about a year, part-time, and then full-time a few months later. And very quickly, I was like, wow, this is really lonely compared to software development. And I didn't know I was doing this, but I kept on my contracts, I would do application security, not pen testing. So I would get a note, oh, you're going to pen test these guys in a few months. So I would call them and I'd say, hi, can I come now? Let me look at your design now. Let's talk now. I'll scan things now. Let's do everything. And I was doing little threat models with them and all sorts of stuff. My boss is like, why is this taking you so long? Um, and then I would test the thing. I'd find stuff wrong with it. And then he's like, am I catching you sitting with the dev again? Like, Tanya, you're supposed to go in, pew, 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 tell them what's wrong and then leave. Stop fixing bugs. Like, stop teaching them stuff. And so then so very quickly I outgrew the first professional mentor because of ethics. I have a lot of ethics and turns out not everyone does. And I was like, oh, I got to move on. So my next professional mentor, who is still one of my mentors, Sharif Kusa, who runs Software Secured, he was like, Tanya, do you want to know why your boss is always frustrated with you? Because what you're doing is called application security. Like, it's nice you throw a pen test at the end, but this is why it's taking you 14 days instead of 10 days. This is why you have so many visits. And this is also why they keep asking for you. And so, did you know that's a full-time job? And you could have that job. Like, there's people dying to hire. I was like, oh. And so I moved over and started doing that full-time. And I wasn't in a data center freezing my buns off, wearing a toque, that's a Canadian for hat, and then mitts, and being by myself for like hours or days at a time, just like hacking away at an app. It's like, oh, I could just like automate all the boring stuff. I get to like teach them to do, I could see improvements as they're happening. A secret thing that the public or that InfoSec in general, a lot of people don't know is that pen testers, at first it's awesome. You're like, I'm hacking all the things. This is so cool. But very quickly, you end up going back to the same place and they have fixed nothing. And it feels really bad. And then imagine coming back the next year and the next year. And I've had pen testers tell me, yeah, I do the test. I get a copy of the old report and I just like update one or two things that because nothing has changed. My work has made zero impact. And sometimes they start getting depressed and they do other work. And that's how sometimes we attract them over to the dark side, which I call AppSec. And where, so I'm not saying pen testing isn't important. It's really important. It's a very valuable job. But I feel like I made a better difference and my personality fit better being like really extrovert and social doing application security. And so I have like the weirdest, I guess, like coming into, oh, you're in a band, I'm in a band. Let's start doing information security. It doesn't make sense, but it worked for me.
So yeah, I grew up a musician myself, drummer as in multiple punk bands in college era. So curious though, how did you get into public speaking? Like the jump from app security to, hey, I'm talking about this in public. I don't see, how did you get there?
It was the community. So I played music forever, and I helped organize music festivals. And I was a concert promoter, so I organized tons of events. And then I had a community of practice with my software developers. And one of the communities of practice I did was like so big, we started webcasting across the entire government for all the software developers because it was going so well. We won 6 awards. And I say it was me. I did the whole program by myself. Anyway, I'm bad for like always giving my team credit, but I'm like, actually, I did that all by myself. And so when I switched into security, part of it was this mentor, but I also met this really interesting guy named Nadeem Duba. And I had hired him to do some work, security work where I was working. And he said, oh, like this week on, I can't remember what days, like I'm doing this workshop about buffer overflows and hacking, and you should come. And I was like, okay. And then he did this amazing buffer overflow workshop. I don't know if you've ever done it, but it's basically like chapter 3 and 4 of the Shellcoder's Handbook. And it's super fun. And he is a really good speaker. He's very, very fun. And there was lots of like young students there. And I hadn't like thought about the stack in a long time. Like I'd been out of college, like almost, oh my gosh, embarrassingly long. I'm in my mid 40s and I did college in my teens, right? So I'm just like, oh man. But it was really fun. And so him and the leader of the OWASP chapter, Sharif Kusa, like after I was like, this is amazing. Can we do a capture the flag contest? And they're like, yeah, sure, if you organize it. So that was like Sharif's jam. And this has been, I've taken this forward with We Hack Purple and everything I do. We can absolutely do it if you do the work. If you want it to happen, you need to volunteer and be a part of making it happen. And so I like ran off like really quickly and formed this giant thing, and we all had a great time, and I got sponsors, and they're like, how'd you do that? I'm like, oh, I've been organizing events for like 15 years with way less money, and no one wants to sponsor music. And so then very quickly I became one of the chapter leaders. And after 3 years of meetings every single month with a dude speaker, he's like, why are there no women? Why am I always the only girl? This completely sucks. Why can't we have lady speakers? And he's like, Tanya, I agree 10,000%. But guess what I have learned? There's one thing that I can't do that you can do. And I'm like, what? And he's like, if you go to a women's meetup and you say, hey, come join this. It'll be fun. I'm part of this. I'm one of the leaders. He's like, it's not the same as if I go and I'm like, I wish there were more chicks in OWASP. He's like, there's no way I can make this come across and not sound creepy. But I believe this is a problem too. So what can I do to help you do this? And so I spoke. So basically, him and all the guys forever were like, you really need to speak. And so I gave a talk at my OWASP chapter and at work, and they were really nice to me. And then my next professional mentor, Adrian de Beaupre, he announced, so he ran the Ottawa B-Sides at the time, and he's like, Tanya Janca is speaking next year. And I was like, what? I didn't even apply. He's like, it's on the internet, so you know it's true. And so him and Rick Mitchell from the OWASP SAT project and all these other people all came together to like help me with my first talk. And I was so nervous. I was like, I'm definitely going to die. And Adrian's like, I'll be right there. I'm like, no, you'll be down there in the audience all nice and safe. I'm going to be on the stage all afraid. And so he actually stood next to me on stage while I did my demo, while my demo failed. Of course it did.
You went into a demo on the first talk? That's a bold move.
I know. And I was hacking this like intentionally vulnerable website, and unbeknownst to me, like it would reset every night at midnight, and someone that morning had smashed it before me. And I'm like, no. And finally, after like 6 times of it not working, I'm like, whatever, you get the picture. Let's continue. And so then I spoke at every other meetup in town, like the JavaScript meetup, the Python meetup, like every single different programming language, all the women's meetups. And I was like, come hang out at OWASP. And we ended up going from like 100 people to 1,500 people.
Wow.
And lots of women and people of all ages, people like students, like newcomers, people have been doing it forever. And we started having like a much bigger kind of volunteer community, if that makes sense, where like the communities, people really liked seeing each other. And we started this thing where whenever anyone shows up new and we don't know them, we'd run over and say, hi, welcome. We're so happy you're here. Do you want to meet new people today? And we would just introduce them to tons of people that we knew were friendly. And it changed from like people awkwardly standing around and waiting for the pizza to people running up and hugging each other. And it was just like such this wonderful, beautiful thing. And so, so then they were like, you should speak at a conference. And I was like, oh no, no one wants to hear what I have to say. But they all just really encouraged me. And so I spoke at the Python meetup in Toronto, which was really exciting because basically they're like, okay, so you're not good enough to like be at the conference but what if you were a backup speaker? And so someone canceled. So I got to replace them, which was exciting. And then I applied at OWASP Global AppSec that was in Ireland. And I got in and I thought I was going to pee my pants. I was like, oh my God. And then by that point, I had spoken like 20 times and I was speaking at every meetup that would just tolerate me. I was speaking at my friends' offices. I was like, yeah, this is amazing. And so then I spoke there and I remember getting off stage and this guy came over and he said, hi, I run a conference in Switzerland. Do you want to come speak there? And I was like, oh, I can't afford to pay for another trip to Europe because speakers usually pay their own way, like their own hotel and they have to take, and he's like, oh, it's all expenses paid. And I was like, what? And then I started getting plane tickets for all around the world because people don't usually jump up and down when they talk about DevOps. Because I literally jump up and down sometimes. And I was just like so excited all the time. And they're like, look, this really happy lady. And so then Microsoft reached out and they said, hey, we heard we need to meet you. And I thought it was a prank call, but it turned out it was real. And it turns out that this hobby is a job. And so that's how I started public speaking, which is not your usual story. But because of all the years of jumping into mosh pits and like literally throwing people off of stages, I'm like, I don't even have to be in key and play an instrument at the same time. It's so much easier. No one's drunk or throwing things. It's great.
Absolutely. That is an incredible story. And then like recently, you didn't speak just once at a conference. You gave at least 4 different talks at RSA, like 3 officially on the schedule, 1 at the DevOps Connect. I got to see that one, very fortunately. That is just so much content at one time. And I guess the music does, factor into that, like preparing for a concert, you're looking at multiple pieces at the same time. But how on earth are you keeping all of these straight in your head? I give 2 talks during the week and I mix them up. Like I literally did that a couple weeks ago. I had 2 talks in the same week, and like the second one, at one slide, I'm like, oh wait a minute, this wasn't supposed to be in that other talk. Sorry, everybody. How do you not do that?
I actually like a thing I hadn't announced, I guess. So I actually applied for RSA. So you apply many, many, many months in advance. And I was working somewhere else, and then I stopped working there. And they're like, that's our content. You don't get to present it anymore. So I actually had to rewrite every single talk that I did and write a brand new talk. So I wrote 4 brand new talks for RSA. That was hard. It took like 3 straight weeks of hard work to do that. But it was really, really fun. And for my workshop with Clint helped. So that was about doing static analysis. So originally it was how to do dynamic analysis in a CI/CD without losing all your friends. Because quite frankly, I see that mistake a lot, where people put some sort of scanner into a CI/CD and dev tools take like 4.3 seconds and like 34 seconds and 12 seconds. And then we're like, we'll be back in 6 hours. And no one thinks that's cool. So Clint helped with that one, which was awesome. And then for the other ones, this might sound weird, but so the one I did about incident response, I give secure coding training all the time. That's what I do a lot at SheHacksPurple. And one of the clients I had in 2022 said, could you just, our devs keep messing up our security incidents. Like they mean well. They're wonderful. We love them. We don't want to be a lecture like that they've done something wrong, but sometimes they don't tell us, and they're trying to fight the security incident by themselves without the right tools. Sometimes they don't realize it's a security incident, and they clean up all the evidence. And sometimes, there's all these things that, have you seen this? Oh yeah, I've seen this a lot. And I had given custom training to my software developers and my sysadmins before, but it hadn't occurred to me that as part of secure coding training, they would want that. So I wrote it for one company, and then every company wanted it from then on. And I got a lot of feedback. Oh, they're reporting tons of security incidents to us. Like they haven't ruined evidence all year. Like this is so amazing. The passovers are really fantastic. They take it really seriously now. And so this might sound so silly, but someone was like, why don't you give that as a talk at a conference? I'm like, oh, that's training. No one wants to see that. And they were like, why don't you submit the training and see what happens? So apparently people liked it. And so that's awesome. And the DevSecOps one, because I know you want to talk about that one. So this might sound really odd, but I've been doing consulting on the side since 2018. So when you speak on stage all the time, if you're not doing the work that you talk about, what do you talk about? Right? Like, so I was coaching this one company for many years and doing DevSecOps around 2 to 4 hours a week. And I would just like smash things into pipelines and code review and do all these things for them, but just a few hours a week to like train their team and help them run their program. And then I started working at IAN's research as well, where I do, this might sound weird, but if there's like a game show and you can phone your friend for help. So basically this service is where you can phone a security person for help. And so you subscribe and you can call me or like Malware Jake or Dave Kennedy or Shannon Leitz or all of these like InfoSec professionals that are like really amazing practitioners. And then we just crush your security problem for you. And so I handle a lot of the AppSec calls. And so I've got to work with almost 400 companies at this point over the course of this many years. And so I've seen program after program after program where there's problems. So I went across like all my notes and it's like what has repeated over and over and over from company to company. And so I came up with 15 worst practices, like things where I'm like, their heart's in the right place. And then it's like, and this is how 100% of the time it fails. And here's how we can avoid that. And so I suggested that to replace the original keynote that RSA had accepted. And they're like, oh, we're in. This is even better. Yes, let's do it. I was really worried. Being able to keynote such a gigantic conference is such a huge honor. And I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to lose it over copyright? No. So I was so happy they let me like resubmit and rewrite a whole talk. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure everyone's pretty glad that they did, but I'm really glad that you talked about that because I saw that talk, and unfortunately, I was stuck in the vendor hall, death by vendor, I call it. I looked at that, and I just wanted to know the talk was called DevSecOps Worst Practices, and you said that you get 15, so maybe we don't have time to talk about 15 of them. But are there a couple that keep coming up after the many years and nearly 400 companies you talked about that come up frequently? What are the worst DevSecOps practices?
So the first one is breaking builds with false positives. It like, I'm sure you see why that's a problem, but a lot of companies, the vendor tells them, the salesperson tells them, oh yeah, just like plug it in and it just will magically make all your AppSec dreams come true. It'll be perfect. And then they're breaking builds because they're like, well, Netflix does it. I'm like, is the name of your company Netflix? No. Okay, so your company's not Netflix. So then you don't have to do what they do. And they're amazing. And like I've had lots of amazing friends that work there and they're cool. We're not as cool as Netflix. I don't know how to tell you that, but we're just not. So we need to be more realistic. And it's okay. Not everyone can be Netflix. Of all the companies I know, only one is Netflix. And so and basically like we break trust every time we do that. Another thing is they just throw the tools in and they don't test them first. So even if they're not breaking any builds, like they throw in this tool and it's been like 6 hours and it's still running and they've done no testing. So they don't know why, or they've written the stack analysis tool and they didn't test it on a couple apps. They just tested it on the one tiny piece of code. And then they're testing it against all the apps. And it's like, oh, it reported 4,000 things, or, oh, it's tomorrow. It's still running. And this might sound really obvious, but I see it all the time. Or test results that are saved into the security tool. And then you have to remote desktop into another server. Then you need a special password and username. Then you go in and you can see those and you can't copy and paste or export them. No dev's going to fix that bug. They don't have time for that. They have work to do. Put your bugs with all of the other bugs. And then it can be part of the work that they do. But if you keep it a secret, they're not going to fix any or almost as many, like very, very little. And again, I see this over and over again. One that people asked about a lot after the talk was, so I call it unreasonable service level agreements. But I started doing a thing and I didn't realize everyone wasn't doing it. So I've had a lot of people comment on this one. So this might sound nuts when I explain it, and it might sound really obvious, but I see it everywhere where they decide our service level agreement is there will be no criticals or highs or mediums going into prod anymore. And we're going to break the build if it's one of those. And then people who support legacy apps can't go to prod, like at all, because they have 300 criticals that are technical debt. And so here they are, let's say they fix 10 and the AppSec person's like, no, you can't go to prod because you have all these criticals. So these 10 fixes stay not in production because it could be a more secure app. And so I just configured the tools to have two SLAs, like one for this is the stuff from the first scan we ever did. This is our legacy. And we will chip away at this slowly over time. But the new stuff, no new big vulnerabilities are going into prod. And then all of a sudden we're passing builds, right? I'm still going to hassle you about your technical debt. I'm still going to be a pain in your butt because that's part of being an AppSec job. You go and you bother them like, hey, so there's still 300. I thought we were going to go for 290 this month instead. What are we going to do about this, right? But I see AppSec person after AppSec person just breaking the build. So either the legacy people are never going to prod or they don't. And so one of my friends actually, she resigned. So I used to work somewhere and then she started working there after me to replace me after I did a contract there. And she said basically after a year, she did this search of all of her pull requests and almost like less than half were merged. And she said, I found tons of pull requests from you. And they're all critical and high vulnerability fixes. And she said there were over 100 that no one had merged because of their one service level agreement. And the other AppSec person kept fighting her. And she's like, that's it. I quit. I can't do this. I can't fix hundreds of bugs and have you not submit them because it needs to be perfect. We're not perfect, buddy. Newsflash. And she was just like, ah. And so we had tea and she told me about it. And I gave her a hug because she needed one after that. But it seems so obvious, right? When I explain it like that, but there's tons of AppSec people who I call the old guard, where they're like, we're not letting any critical vulnerabilities into prod. I'm like, they're already there. You're not letting a new one in. Oh, come on.
I think when you explain things, it seems obvious, but I think, but I think someone coming from the outside would be like, yeah, of course, we'd block all the critical vulnerabilities, but that different mindset that you have to come in with to say, no, actually, we need to look at this a bit differently and move together because we're already starting off on a poor footing.
Yes, yes. And if you can automate it, all the better.
So I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of hug ops. In the Drupal community, we embrace that a lot because there's a lot that goes wrong in Drupal, and you need a hug sometimes. So
It's true.
hug
Oh,
ops
I
is
should
very
have told
true.
her I'm giving you hug ops. That would have been perfect.
So I want to pivot just a little bit
Yeah.
here, but I guess we're in the same realm of around community. You run a community.
I do.
We Hack Purple. I'm a member. We get the newsletters. Very grateful to be a part of it. And you're famously known as SheHacksPurple. The purple branding. Can you just talk a little bit
It's
about that?
yeah. So when I started in security, I did pen testing, which is known as red teaming, or it's part of red team. So red teaming is a special exercise you do with usually a bunch of penetration testers, and you attack production to see what your real risks are. And so when you write an exploit, you're on your red team. So every sort of offensive style security, and I always explain that does not mean we swear at people. It means we test the limits of our systems. And if you think about it, stress testing and performance testing sort of fold into this idea of testing the limits of everything, where blue team are defenders. And so if you fix a bunch of bugs, you implement a WAF, a web app firewall, or a RASP, a runtime security protection tool. When you patch things and you upgrade your frameworks, all those things are defense. And because I kept not being able to choose which one I wanted to do, and they're like, there you are hanging out with the devs, showing them how to fix bugs. And, you gave that workshop to everyone on how to do this, but then you smash their apps later. And it's like you can't convince yourself which one you want to do. So it's like your purple team because you keep doing both. And so then I was at the first international conference I ever spoke at, OWASP Global AppSec in 2016. And on stage, this lady named Jaya Balu, she was on a panel, but she kept just playing with her phone and ignoring the audience, which was really confusing. I was like, well, that's not very respectful. And they would ask her a question. She's like, no. And she kept just playing with her phone. And I was really surprised because, here there are like a couple hundred of us wanting to hear what she says, waiting patiently. And finally, partway through, she's like, okay, I'm ready to talk. I'm sorry. My company created a proof of concept exploit from the NSA hack of one of the vulnerabilities. And we checked it in to db.exploit so that people could use it to test their systems. But someone has taken it and turned it into a vulnerability, like a malicious malware, and they've attacked the NHS, the British Health Service. And I have to go right now. Oh my gosh, what have I done? And she ran off the stage, and all the incident responders ran out of the room, and everyone started sharing things on Twitter. And I didn't have a Twitter account. And this woman named Shannon Leitz, who also spoke, and she's amazing. And I was like looking over her shoulder at her phone. And like, what's happening? And she's like, it's called WannaCry. And I was like, oh, this is so amazing. And she's like, Tanya, get an account, grow up and be a real InfoSec person and get your first Twitter account. And I was like, okay. And I was rushing to make it and I needed a username. And I'm like, well, my email is shehackscomputers@gmail.com. And it's like, shehackscomputers is too long. And then I think maybe my friend Nancy Garishe, she's like, why aren't you just purple? Just hack the purple. So he's like, SheHacksPurple. Oh, it works. Let's just go. So I can tell my company about WannaCry and I can be a good instant responder. And then it just stuck. And people started saying, oh, it's the purple lady. And I wore a purple shirt one day and everyone loved it. And then my friend Kevin Wall, one day he's like, you know, you show up every day and your hair is still brown. I wonder when it's going to be purple and you're going to be all in. And so I dyed purple streaks just to play like a little prank on Kevin. And he laughs so hard. And so people just loved it. And so when I was like, what am I going to call my company? One of my friends was like, well, I think it's obvious. You're going to call it We Hack Purple. And I was like, oh, I guess I am. And so, yeah, that's how it happened. Like, it was just sort of this weird organic thing. And that's how I started having a Twitter account. I just wanted to read what Shannon was doing. And then eventually people started following me. I was like, oh, hi.
Well, definitely I'm one of them. I haven't heard that story anywhere. So I'm really glad to hear that.
It was amazing. Jada Blue's pretty incredible.
All connected to WannaCry. That's a terrifying
which was
thing.
WannaCry was not good, but it connected a lot of things for me inadvertently.
So when I talked to you back at RSA, one of the things you were very excited about was the Security Champions program that you're implementing, or you're initializing. What's the word there?
Yeah. Kicking off, I guess.
You were kicking
starting.
off, yeah. Let's take that again. So when I talked to you back at RSA, you were really excited about the new initiative that you're starting, Security Champions program. Can you tell us, what is that? What's the high level overview of what's a security champion? What does that mean?
Okay, so when I started my first AppSec program, I wanted everyone to scan their apps with an open source DAS scanner. And I was just like, I just want you to be like, pew, pew, and fix the highs and criticals you find. That's it. This is all I wanted for my first AppSec program because I had zero experience and they had zero AppSec there before. And I was like, if you can do that, then when it comes to me, I can do much more thorough testing. And then together we can make better apps. And very quickly, there was just one person per team who was my guy. And sometimes my guy was a lady. I'm like, this is my human. And I would always just talk to Liam or talk to Stefan or talk to whoever the person was on that team. And then I started having meetings with them and showing them stuff. And then when I went to my next office, they said, oh, that's called a Security Champions program. I was like, oh. And so then I started again there, again, very informally at first. And after 9 months, we would have like these lunches and we would teach each other things and they would run off and secure their apps. And I was like, these are the best. And I would give them candy and bake them cakes and cookies sometimes. Because I have this, it's weird. I don't really like cake, but I really like making them because they're very pretty. Anyway, and so I would bring little carb and sugar related gifts. And so then when I joined Microsoft and I started speaking at lots of places, I met this guy named Ray LeBlanc, and he and this other guy named Aaron Lord, they run Hella Secure blog. And Ray's like, hey, check out this blog I wrote. And it was about his Security Champions program, which was 5 years old. And he was super organized with his champions. And he outlaid like this framework that he used. And so then through Ian's research, very quickly, so I had one call about security champions and I helped them organize their program. And then before I know it, I had taken 40 calls like 40 different companies, and like I help them start it, and then like a few months later you check in, etc. And so companies have been asking me like, hey, will you run our champions programs? And I can't work full time at a company and run their security. Do you know what I mean? Like I can't run We Hack Purple and do that. So instead I came up with a coaching program that we've just launched. And so basically now that We Hack Purple has a whole bunch of professors, we have tons and tons of speakers. And for years, I've been going and speaking at people's security champions programs because that is a thing. So you want to get the champions excited and interested in security. But if you are not good at public speaking, it's really hard, especially if you're a very introverted, shy AppSec person. And a lot of AppSec people, I'd say the majority, more than half, are more introverted rather than extroverted. And the idea of doing public speaking is sort of like, I'd rather you punch me. Like they just really, really, really don't like it at all. And so I started getting invited to do that quite a bit. And so basically, we've launched this program where we'll provide a new speaker every month, and we will provide this framework for you to work within, and then a coach that like makes sure you're on track with your program. And I was talking to this amazing person named Brendan yesterday. What was his last name? Just a second. Brendan. Where are you, Brendan? In my emails. Oh man. Okay. Well, his name's Brendan, and he is from Synopsys. And he has been running security champions programs forever. And he's going to be on my podcast soon. And nice. Him and I, it's like, have you ever met someone where you're like such kindred spirits and you just like nerd out so much and you get so excited? And he's like, I love security champions. I'm like, it's the best. And so this isn't a thing that a lot of people offer for some reason. So this is a need. And so the reason why you have champions is because there's not enough AppSec people. There just aren't. Dwayne McKenzie, I'm pretty sure you know this. There's just not enough security professionals in general to do all the security work we need doing. Even like there's all these open positions all over the internet. But then imagine you're the AppSec person and you have 200 software development teams that you're supposed to be taking care of. You can't personally know everyone on every team. You can't personally coach every single person, but you can meet with champions, right? You can train one person from each of those teams and then maybe mentor some of them and have someone else on your team mentor some of them. Like if we want to scale our security programs, we need the users on board. And when you're doing AppSec, it's software developers that we need on board. And so it's a way to get the software developers interested, to get their buy-in in like wanting to secure their apps and how to do it, how to use the tools, etc. But it's also a way to scale and quite frankly, like save money. So if you have the developers writing more secure code, you have the developers running the scans and using the tools themselves, fixing the bugs before it gets out to that pen tester or that last test before a prod, you've saved a ton of money, right? And if those things never get into prod in the first place, you don't have a security incident, you don't have an emergency or a data breach or all these other problems. And again, you've saved money and face, like you've saved the reputation of your company. And so there's like a huge return on investment in saving security dollars and saving also, I guess, a lot of time. Because software developer, so I as a dev, we do not like it when 2 weeks before we go to prod, the security team shows up for the first time and tells us we've done everything wrong. It's like, why weren't you here 6 months ago when we started this? Like, where were you, buddy? And so with security champions, the person's always there because they're on your team. And so I've had a lot of success with this. And like, if you're the only AppSec person and there's 2,000 developers, like, what do? You can't just work harder. You can't work more hours. That's like, it's just impossible. So you have to work smarter. And so scaling is a thing that I've paid a lot of attention to. And OWASP just started their first security champions, I guess, project. And it's just a link to like my blog and Ray's blog and another couple of blogs. But I'm hoping over time, like we can develop a framework that everyone can use. I released one on my blog. And it has like 6 steps and there's like a recipe and it's like how you can do the things. It's not super formal, like something like NIST or BSIM, but it's like follow these steps and it will at least be okay. So
I think that's a benefit, honestly. The NIST standards, They just re-upped them at RSA. We got the 2.0, and it's a lot of reading. And at the end, you're like, what am I supposed to do again? So I think simpler, like here's a few steps is a much better direction on things.
Yeah, and I tried to make it very, very actionable. Like one of the suggestions, so one of the steps is like recruiting, and I call it attracting. So I want to attract the right people to my program, because if you volunteer someone and force them to be a security champion, they are not an amazing champion. They are going to be lukewarm at best, because they're like, oh, I was late to a meeting and then as punishment, now I'm a security champion. That's going to be a crappy champion. And so like one of my action items is like change just the signature in your email to say, I'm looking for security champions. Ask me how. I have found champions that way. They just write me and they're like, what is that? I'm like, oh, it's this, blah, 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 blah. And then two of them were like, hey, okay, I'll try that. And at every single, like all staff meeting, get up for 5 minutes and talk and say, okay, so this is like stuff the security champion or the security team has accomplished lately. And I want you to know we're looking for security champions. And this is what it is. And this is what we'll expect from you. And this is what you'll get. So send me an email if you're interested and I'll tell you all about it. And just like doing it, it sounds so obvious, like when I'm saying it as a list, but people will say, I don't know how to start. I'm like, change your email signature. That's not hard. You can definitely do that. And then just every time you send an email, you're getting the message out. And these little things work, and it all builds up to a program.
I'm very glad that you found a way to duplicate yourself, because as you've been talking for most of this episode, I'm just sitting here wondering, how does she do so many things at the same time? Yeah, I'm glad that you're creating and putting down and creating some frameworks around how we can get more of you working in the security field. There's going to be links to the frameworks that you've created in the show notes for those listening. So please check out the show notes if you want to check out the Security Champions frameworks that Tanya's been talking about. I just want to quickly, we'll start wrapping up because we've taken up a lot of your time and we appreciate that. But I wanted to finish up with something that I know that there's going to be so many people listening to this that are going to want to know. And what advice do you have for people, let's say developers, because that's where you started, that are looking at making their way into security, into becoming a security champion? Are there some steps, some resources, some recommendations that the listeners that are wanting to step into this world, what can they do today, tomorrow, next week to start their journey?
Okay, so I have a bunch of things. So right now while we're recording this, it's Monday, but you might not have been aware it's also Cyber Mentoring Monday. So since 2018, I've run a mentor matching program on Twitter, and I'm now running it on Blue Sky and also on Mastodon on infosec.exchange. And so basically I use the hashtag, all one word, Cyber Mentoring Monday, and I announce it is the day. And so basically people respond and say, I'm looking for a mentor in this, or I'm willing to offer a mentor in that. And most of the action is actually all in direct messages so that you can't see it. So someone says, oh, I'm hoping to learn more about incident response. And you might see one or two posts that respond, but really their inbox is filling up. And so if you are listening to this and you want to get into information security, the first thing I suggest is trying to figure out what topic is of interest to you, and then finding a mentor within that community or topic, and then joining every single community that has to do with that topic. So for AppSec, very selfishly, I would suggest you join WeHackPurple, but also OWASP, the Open Worldwide Application Security Project, and WeHackPurple, and even DevSecCon maybe, which is run by a company, but it's still lots of nice folks in there. I know their community manager, and she's an amazing community manager. Hi, Sam. And I feel like joining a community that's the topic you like, finding a professional mentor, those are an awesome start. If you want to specifically learn application security, inside the We Hack Purple community, there are free courses. So as part of a business deal that didn't work out last year, I made all of the We Hack Purple courses for free. And so you can take application security levels 1, 2, 3, and level 2 goes into how to create a developer advocacy program and a developer education program and a security champions program, which all kind of like hold hand in hand, if that makes sense. And so if you want to learn about that, there's an actual course and it's free. There's infrastructure as code. There's Azure security. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. There's lots and lots of stuff. And all of that is free. And we have monthly events as well that are free. But another thing you could do, so I love OWASP. I'm like giant fangirl. And I'm a lifetime member. And they have a YouTube channel. Their YouTube channel's amazing. They have like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours from all the different conferences and meetups that they've had over the years. OWASP is 21 years old. It's turned 22 this year. And so they have like, so I like to think I have like lots of awesome AppSec content, but they have the most, and it's awesome. And so if you could find topics that interest you or find a speaker that you really like, you could just go and see all of their talks for free. And so I'm a big fan of like, I find someone and then I'm like, oh, I'm going to watch everything they've ever done. I'm that person. Just like when I find an author I like, I read every single book they've ever written. I read all of their books. I just go back like years. I'm like, I'm going to read every single thing they've done because that's what I'm like. And so OWASP has made that very easy to do on their YouTube page, which is really awesome.
That's fantastic. And there's going to be links to a lot of resources in the show notes. If you're listening and you're trying to jot all this down, then you don't worry, you can just go to the show notes there. Well, Tanya, we've come to the end, and just thank you so much for this. Usually we ask where people can follow you, but that's, I think, the great thing about the purple branding is We Hack Purple and SheHacksPurple. Is that across all social media platforms? People can follow, find you, and with the same handles?
It is, except for SheHacksPurple.dev. That is not me. That is an imposter. I am not trying to sell you online gambling, just to be clear. So ignore that site. But SheHacksPurple.ca, WeHackPurple.com, SheHacksPurple on every single platform, and WeHackPurple. Those are all me. Just ignore the .dev. I should not have let that domain name go, and I have learned a lot of lessons today from all the people who sit on domain names and never use them. I just learned that lesson.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, thank you again. Dwayne, do you have any final notes before we press the big red button?
No, just want to say thanks again for being here. Thanks for promoting OWASP. I love hearing OWASP come up in conversations. I love talking about that at conferences, and the number of people who are doing security who are like, OWASP is still around, or what's OWASP? Always just shocks me. So
yeah.
thank you again for promoting it.
Thank you. It has been my pleasure.